I'm sure everyone's seen the news by now, but it'd be rude not to talk about it, wouldn't it? That we Aston Villa have entered discussions for a formal partnership with Spanish side Real Union, and this is really interesting, mate, because they're a founding member of La Liga. They're a club that means a lot to Unai Emery. I believe his father played for them, as well as maybe his grandfather.
Hmm.
And Unai already owns a stake in this. And it feels like every sort of 2 or 3 months we're talking about V Sports expanding. And I mean, you must be buzzing about this, mate, being the Spanish football aficionado. I don't know a single person that enjoys La Liga more than you, mate. This is interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, man, this is interesting. As you say, the big headline is that Unai controls the majority stake in this club. Apparently got a 75% stake. If you Google it, Unai Emery is named as their owner. And yet, you're absolutely right. It's a club that very much runs in the family. So his granddad, bit of a club legend at Real Union, played 110 games for them from 1928 to 1935. So going back a fair way, but that just kind of came after like the club's real heyday. They won 3 Copa del Rey between 1918 and 1927. And so, yes, just after that, Unai's granddad played, as I say, just over a century of games for them. His father, both were goalkeepers. His father and his granddad. His father, not quite as storied a career with Real Union, just the 15 games with them over a shorter spell between 1957 and 1959. But his father was a real journeyman, played for 9 clubs in a 16-year playing career before Unai himself went on to have a little time with them. They're from his kind of local club. Obviously, Unai, born and bred in the Basque Country, and Unai spent some time there as a youngster, wherefore he came through, I think, at Real Sociedad. And so, yeah, it's a club that very much runs in the family. It's very exciting to see the Villa kind of get involved with the club. They're not a team that I think you can expect to hear too much about, probably more in the ZFC role than, say, the Vitoria Guimaraes role. It's a club that they're in the 3rd tier of Spanish football. And for those that know, you obviously got La Liga, you then got the Segunda, which sits underneath it. And then the 3rd tier is split into loads and loads and loads of different leagues. It all kind of goes regional. It's very interesting. And as a result, because there's so many leagues kind of in that 3rd tier, it's notoriously difficult to gain promotion back to the Segunda. So since their relegation in 2009, 2010, Union haven't managed to make it back up into the Segunda division where they could face shot at promotion to La Liga. Maybe that's where the Villa come in. Or
Maybe.
should I say, V Sports.
Well, I think it's important to say V Sports, isn't it? Because there's been a lot of hassle with the multi-club ownership model that has arisen over the past couple months. But this is interesting, mate. I mean, they currently sit 6th in their little subdivision. So, I mean, I don't know the inner workings of playoffs and how that would work, but they're, what, 2 points off top? So, I mean, that's interesting. And Spanish, I mean, it's nice that I think really what this says to me, mate, is that, because there's been all this talk, hasn't there, from pundits and journalists alike of Manchester United should go and get Unai Emery and this and that. We're really sort of nailing ourselves to the mast here, mate. We're going to, obviously he signed to this lucrative contract. He's obviously going to honour the contract. But, we've gone, well, listen, we'll back your club. This is how much faith we have in Unai Emery, that we are willing to do business with a passion project of his, which is something that Nassef and Wes don't necessarily need to do. But I guess it's just a testament to the relationship that Unai has with the ownership.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, mate. You're absolutely right. I think it's a way of it's a nice show of faith, and I think it goes to show the kind of levels of harmony that exist upstairs at the club, that they're willing to kind of help Unai, or it's mutually beneficial, right? That it's another club for their portfolio, but it's a nice show of faith to Unai that they'll go and help kind of his team, and like one that he's clearly got a lot of emotion and family connections to and everything like that. It'd be one hell of a story. I mean, there's some big teams down there in the 2 groups that make up the Tercera. So you've got the likes of Malaga got relegated, Deportivo are in there as well. So there's some big sides split across the two groups, and so it'd be really interesting to kind of watch their games with an eager eye, as you say, because they've enjoyed a pretty good start to the season. But no, it's really interesting to kind of see the expansion of this model, and it'd be really interesting, won't it, to kind of look back in a few years and really see what the fruits of the labour are. It's very difficult kind of in this early stage. Even, we've been involved with Victoria for around a year now, and we've not really seen or heard too much of it since that initial acquisition. And then obviously we had to kind of change the controlling stake because of those multi-club model issues and everything like that. And so the recent Vissel Kobe stuff, all of the different stuff, ZFC, in a few seasons' time, it'll be really interesting to kind of look back and really see how we've managed to impact these clubs, what our legacy has been in all these different corners of the globe, really.
I think what's interesting as well, to kind of keep it in Spain, you look at the side that's leading La Liga now, or they may be second, Girona. It's a fantastic story until you realise that they're backed by the City Football Group. But it's, that's obviously the model that we're trying, and that doesn't take away from the story. It is a phenomenal story, promoted 2 seasons ago, was it last season? And they're just absolutely storming it in La Liga. City acquired the majority share in Girona all the way back in 2017, and since then, and maybe even prior to that, has been led by Pep Guardiola's brother, sort of running the club. So you're seeing, 2017, that's like 6 years ago. So they've taken a side. I couldn't tell you where Girona were when City purchased them, if I'm being completely honest, but they've now managed to transform a sort of middling side in Spain to a side that's somehow punching well above its weight and is currently in a title race.
Yeah, and that's where the big issues come with multi-club models, is that, okay, so now if you're on keep up this form and they manage to get themselves into the Champions League, say, and the pots come out and they're placed into a team with Manchester City, how does that play out? How does that work? Because surely the City Football Group, the City, aren't going to want Girona potentially knocking out or pulling off some crazy upset on the real crown jewel in their group of clubs. And so that's where the issues arise. You had a sort of similar thing. We have this sort of similar thing going on now with Jim Ratcliffe, who's attempting to take over Manchester United, who also owns a controlling stake in Nice, and everything like that. And so you've got Nice are doing very well in Ligue 1, so you've got another potentially similar situation arising there. But I think the most high profile recently that spans 2 different corners of the globe is Newcastle and their involvement with the Saudi Arabian nation state, who obviously also own, and I've spoken about this on the podcast before, it's very well documented, like all of those clubs, the vast majority of those big clubs in the Saudi Pro League. And so when you see someone like Sandro Tonali go out of the game with this gambling ban, and then all the links pick up the next day that Ruben Neves could conveniently join on a loan to stand in and replace him, these are the issues that can arise. And so Villa, and we kind of said this at the time, we have to navigate this quite carefully, because if you don't, I think you will start to see UEFA really crack down on exactly how these situations are managed.
I think, is this a case of maybe we sort of use the clubs within the V Sports family more to sort of raise commercial capital for NSWE, the holding company of Aston Villa? That seems to be the safest sort of option there. You grow the profiles of these clubs in their respective nations, and that in turn makes the owners more money, which in turn benefits Villa somehow in the long run, I guess, through share prices rising, all things like that. It's interesting, mate. And yeah, I think, to be fair as well, when you're looking at the fact that realistically, are we going to be signing anybody from any of these teams for like big money? Are we going to be? I don't think the only way that we're going to be sort of cooking books is if they're taking people off us for questionable sums, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm being, if Vissel Kobe all of a sudden come in with a £10 million offer for Bertrand Traore, then by all means, we deserve to be investigated. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's ways of going about this. So, but I'm confident that these guys know what they're doing. I don't think they would have persisted as hard. I think,
No, I agree.
really, when we spoke about Vissel Kobe, we were like, this is weird. Like, at that point, you've fully committed to the idea of multi-club ownership, haven't you? So the fact that we are where we are now suggests that the ownership and the people who know and whose job it is to sort of facilitate this, work with the other clubs, clearly know what they're doing. So, that goes well above you and I and probably many of the listeners in this podcast as well, really.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But one potentially just aesthetics thing to mention, like using the City Football Group as an example. I mean, they have a whole host of clubs, like outside of the ones that we kind of recognise. There are some like that kind of slips under the radar. They've got controlling stakes in the likes of Palermo and Estac Troy in France and stuff like that. But a lot of them have very similar badges. So if you look at the Man City badge, the Melbourne City badge, and the New York City badge, all very similar to Man City. And then outside of that, a lot of the clubs play in very similar colours as well. So obviously you've got those three teams that I mentioned. You've then got the likes of Mumbai City and everything like that. You've got Girona, which obviously they were kind of a standout. They were a club in their own entity before. But it's interesting that they have kind of been moulded in the kind of City mould, even an aesthetic level. And you've also got the way that you can kind of use those projects to nurture up-and-coming managers and talent. I mean, one of the clubs that they own is Yokohama Marinos, who obviously Ange Postecoglou had a lot of success with when he was out in the J1 league. And so you can kind of use them and you can potentially look to move them between the different kind of organizations. And the one thing that you are starting to see is a nice kind of hierarchy between the clubs in terms of the level.
Yeah.
And so you've probably got Villa at the top. You've then got Vittoria and then Vissel Kobe, and then you've got potentially, ZFC and Real Union kind of at that bottom, and that you've got a nice kind of ladder forming there. And so if you did have that kind of talent progression pathway, there is exactly that. There's a nice pathway appearing.
Yeah, ultimately that will, we'll benefit from that. Maybe not within the next year, maybe not within the next 10 years, but it's definitely something to keep an eye out on, and is very interesting. Again, just given Unai Emery's connection to the club, very happy that we're seemingly keeping him happy.